Hey, what is up, lovelies? It's Lynn the Gacha Goblin, and today we're going to do something quite fun. Now, I may not be the best at it, but we're going to attempt at something out of my comfort zone. We're going to be talking about lore. Now, welcome to my hopefully easy to follow summary of the Love and Deepspace timeline. Now, before we jump into this, I do want to say that I'm absolutely no MatPat or lore queen like Oofy TV, but I've seen lots of people wanting to get some general idea of the timeline of this game, and that is exactly what this video is going to attempt at accomplishing. However, I will also mention another disclaimer. This theory is not solely mine. All the speculations and ideas in this timeline mainly come from users on Tumblr, specifically Exactly Clever Pirate and Nobody's Savior. I also wanted to give a shout out to Sakura on YouTube, who was the first person to cover this topic back a few months ago, but this video has some updated information because we have the addition of Silas and also the branch stories that have come out. That being said, of course, there are going to be links in the description. Okay, so hopefully you can check out all of their source material there, and you can probably kind of like follow along and do your own speculations after this video. Alright, now needless to say, major spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about pretty much all of the main points of the game, so that we can explain the timeline. So if you're here and you don't want to hear it, please do click away, and once you want to know what the timeline is, this video will always be here for you. Alrighty, so it may come to a shock for some people, you know, that this game is actually a sci-fi fantasy romance game. So it might be a little bit of a shocker to find out that there is also some time travel in this game. Time travel, we all know time travel gets a little bit messy whenever you're talking about it. However, it also has elements of powers like the evol system, lots of biomechanical things that we're talking about when it comes to Lemuria. But yeah, and that's why, you know, time stuff, messy stuff. Sometimes it's more like a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Look, I am a Doctor Who fan, David Tennant, absolute favorite. When I can highlight him in my videos, I will. That being said, we're going to attempt to explain timelines and time travel in this video. So for Love and Deepspace, it's kind of like a loop, because there are so many reincarnations, there are so many people going back into time, lots of references to the different timelines. It's very, very confusing. But if you know anything of the TV show Loki, you do know that some of these things, some of these events will branch out to different timelines, and that's what I'm assuming is going to be happening moving forward into the game. But that is just a theory of mine. I don't know if that's any truth. So let's get started. Now we're going to split this timeline for Love and Deepspace into three major parts. So we're going to talk about the distant past. This is going to include Lemuria, and you know, when people are not aware of evols. However, I believe that the term evols was quoted during the time of the MC, the present MC that we know after the Chrono Rift catastrophe. Then we're going to be discussing the present timeline where the main story takes place right now. And then we're going to be talking about the distant future, which is basically Philos, or Earth's future, because at some point the Earth breaks and is held together by a protocore, like the tectonic plates itself. Now there are two major events that happen on the timeline that we know of in every story. We know of the Chrono Rift catastrophe, where wanderers entered the world because the deep space tunnel was exposed and people could see into basically time and space to see Philos, basically the Earth's future. So, all of those standard myth cards that you're experiencing, that they're referencing Philos, Philos is actually not another planet, but the future of Earth, which is kind of scary if you think about it. Imagine a big hole rifting into the into the sky, and you could just see another planet, and you realize it's actually Earth. Anyway, and then the other major catastrophe, I guess, is basically the death of Earth and the birth of Philos. So this, I think, is going to be more of a like time frame ish kind of thing, where it's not happening on the same day, or like the Earth breaks apart and then suddenly turns into Philos. I think there is probably like a dead period there for the Earth, and we're gonna see what happens. Now we're going to see who love interest exactly. Where should we start on the timeline, right? So we have Raphael, Xavier, Zane, and Silas. And if you're looking at all of their stories, and if you want to experience the backtracking, all right, major hint about what I'm gonna say, then the best person to follow the timeline would, in my opinion, be Xavier's. And also on the resource materials that I was reading, they started off with explaining it through Xavier's eyes, because he kind of sees most of what the timeline is. Alrighty, so we're going to start in the future. Okay, so the first person we're going to be talking about is Xavier's When Shooting Stars Fall. If you've seen the Branch Story trailer coming out for this game right now, following Xavier's story, then you would see the similarities in this anecdote. So this anecdote basically talks about how the Xavier and MC meet for the very, very first time. They go to school together, they basically fall in love, and then Xavier finds out that they live on the planet of Philos. So the people of Philos live incredibly long lives. He doesn't know why at this point. He just knows that everybody is very long lived. But when he meets the MC, he realizes that not everybody is blessed with this kind of like condition. So he learns that the MC is sick and will die eventually, actually very soon in terms of his long lifespan. So he goes out and he disappears for a while, and the MC's kind of like wondering where he went. He actually went to go get a protocore that will help stabilize her condition. However, when they finally meet, it was too late. They did meet each other, but the MC dies in Xavier's hands, and Xavier is basically holding this super magical protocore that was supposed to sustain her. He went through a lot of trials to get it. He comes back with a collar on his neck, and he also comes back with some injuries too. So he went through something. He did something to try and save the MC, but it was too late. He then makes a promise that they will meet in the future, in a future life or whatever. So next we're going to be talking about Zane's standard myth memory. So Zane's standard myth memory, the whole concept of why Zane is in a tower is because the people realize that the protocore that they have not only sustains life, however is very powerful and needs to be protected. Now the running theory here is that people realize that it could be easily stolen, since Xavier was able to steal that specific protocore, and in this memory it's referred to as the Creatio protocore. And in this timeline, in this time frame, Zane and the MC basically like, she dies many times over because of her heart condition, but then falls in love with Zane all over again in many iterations of their lives together, where he is still sworn to Astra to protect the Creatio protocore, until finally in this specific memory he gives the Creatio protocore to the MC so that way she can live a longer life. But because of that, he falls into a deep slumber and is basically encased in ice, trapped in an ice castle. So that is the speculation of what happens next in the timeline. Following this would actually be Raphael's story in his standard myth. So this is the Deep Sea Promise with him, or Deep Sea Promise and Deep Sea Riches. So, as I said before, Zane was able to give the MC the Creatio Protocore, which basically kind of like revitalize her, gives her more power, lets her live longer. However, she is still technically human, so she dies and reincarnates, but she still has this power. And in Raphael Deep Sea Promise, she is actually considered a princess, even though she does not have any royal blood. The MC is guarded because of her heart, because of the power that she has within her, and that is what Raphael is actually going for. So Raphael in this story is the technically still the sea god. He is still the sea god, but of a dead Lemuria who has been long gone. And he has a prophecy that he's trying to fulfill, saying that you need to get the heart of the sea back, which is what the MC has. But it has to be given willingly by the MC to Raphael. And so that's why they have this whole interaction, why they meet again. Basically, they fall in love, of course, and he falls in love with the MC and realizes, I can't do this. I can't make her give away her life for Lemuria, because his goal is to give Lemuria back its life and to revitalize it, to bring the waters back to the seas. However, the story overall, the prophecy is saying that it gives supreme power, and Raphael is not looking for supreme power. He's looking to revitalize Lemuria itself. So he basically kind of like erases the MC's memory, because at this point she remembers her past life with him as a sea god in Lemuria way back, and he erases those memories, but she remembers them anyway, and they end up just going to Wayfall City together. So there is no death in this one. Technically, it's a happy ending in this story, but it feels very incomplete. So that happens, and the next thing on the timeline is actually Xavier's standard myth memory as well. So his standard myth memory is actually very interesting, because from this point on, from Shooting Star's fall, Xavier's anecdote, until this standard myth memory, he's been alive. He's been waiting for the MC to be reincarnated to come back to him, which is very sweet, but it's also very tragic for Xavier, because he's lived so many years without her. And they finally meet again. They go to the Night School Academy. The MC wants to become a knight to protect Philos. Philos is actually dying at this point. This is the world that they live on. In all of these stories here, Philos is where they're all located right now. So this Xavier is basically, pretending like he doesn't know who the MC is, even though the MC is already falling in love with Xavier. Xavier has already been in love with the MC anyway. And they're in school together, They're in school together. They meet Jeremiah. Jeremiah is basically third wheeling their whole act. And then Xavier is also the crown prince of the kingdom. And he has a confrontation with his dad. Then he disappears for a very long time, I think 200 years. And the MC and Jeremiah become official knights, who are then on a mission in the forest. And that's when she runs into Xavier. And Xavier tells her all the things that he found out about the forest, about what the king told him during before he vanished. And he basically tells you that the royal family has been sacrificing human lives into the forest to revitalize the protocore that's holding Philos together and keeping everybody long-lived. And then he also tells her about a myth, like there's a person who is destined to reincarnate over and over again to keep that protocore alive, and we all know that person to be the MC. So that is also how wanderers are made. The lives that are sacrificed, those bodies turn into wanderers, the soulless creatures that basically kill other people. And it's what Xavier doesn't want anymore. He doesn't want to live on a planet that is sustained by the lives of people. And that's actually mentioned in the trailer, which is really, really crazy. And he realizes that the answer to this is actually to go back in time. It's not currently on Philos. The answer to save Philos, the answer to save the MC, to stop Wanderers from existing anymore, Xavier realizes that the answer is in the past. So he goes on a mission, the backtracking mission, to go into the Deepspace tunnel and head in the past. It's not really specified where exactly he's aiming to go, but something goes wrong in the Deepspace tunnel on their mission, and that is where he kind of like goes back into this little portion right here. So this is where we're going to start the present timeline. So the spaceship fails. He ends up in the past. I guess in the present. He ends up in the present. And the first time that we find out what is happening is this story here, his anecdote called Passing By. So Passing By is a time before the Chrono Rift catastrophe happened, before the MC was even born. Xavier goes back in the past, lands somewhere he never intended to with his crew. And they're all trying to assume different lives and kind of like blend into society. So in this story, he basically takes the place of a police officer, which is very similar to the knight position and knight training that he had back on Philos. So it was very natural for him to go into this position, and he basically has a confrontation with one of the other backtrackers in this story, because they're fighting on what they should do next, is what I'm going to say. And then if we fast forward many years, he basically, like Xavier, then has to stop being this policeman because everybody else is getting old, everybody else is aging but him. So he fakes his death, and he assumes a new identity. And this is where I'm going to say the MC is born, Zane is born, and Raphael is born. Now, I made this into a bracket because they're not born in the same year. They are all technically different ages, with Zane being the eldest one on this list. And then we have the Chrono Rift catastrophe. So at the age of, I think, 6 or 7, the MC experiences the Chrono Rift catastrophe. This is the first time that she sees Xavier as Lumiere, but she only knows him as Lumiere, who saves everybody from all of the Wanderers. He had experience with the Wanderers before, of course, since he's from Philos, so he knew how to destroy them, he knew how to save all the people. But this is the first time that Earth sees Wanderers, sees the rift in the sky for the Deepspace tunnel, and basically shocks everybody. And I'm guessing that this is when evols become a thing. And then we have fast forward a few years or something. I'm not actually so sure about the ages. I didn't pay attention to the numbers of the years, so if you want that information, go back to the source material that I've linked in the description box, because that is where you can find the exact years and dates that are discussed for this timeline. I'm just giving a general rundown. Okay, so the MC goes on a field trip to Hat Island where she meets Raphael as children, and they make a promise to each other that they will meet again in the future. And then we have Zane's never-ending winter. Now, prior to this, he's already gained many accolades. He's become a doctor, he studied in college, graduated early, and all of these things. And he is then commissioned to go on this trip to Mount Eternal. Mount Eternal, on there they find like a very strange ice that is kind of all-consuming. And my speculation is that this is going to be basically where Astra, has his powers kind of like revealed and whatnot. So I'm guessing that is what Mount Eternal has deep down inside of it. That is speculation. There is no like hardcore evidence of that. But in this anecdote, so Zane is on this outing with a group of people who basically all die, and Zane is also forced to kill the commander of that expedition because he is encased in the ice. So that is basically Zane's first encounter with death, like actual death itself. Oh, also during the Chrono Rift catastrophe, in that timeline, in that time span, Zane loses control of his evil, and he also dreams of Dawnbreaker for the first time. Okay, so next up we have Siren's Song with Raphael. So Raphael is a few years older here. I think he is basically still a teenager, I think. And because in the point of the story, I think you meet him at the age of 22. So he is, I think, a teenager in Siren's Song. And he is basically assuming the role of an opera singer. At this point, he has been forced out of Lemuria. He is forced to live on land with some of his family, some of his Lemurian friends. However, because the people have discovered the ruins of Lemuria during this time period, they're exploiting, like humans are exploiting all of the Lemurian technology, the Lemurian people, and using them for tests. And that angered Raphael, so he is on a killing spree, basically getting revenge for all of the humans that are taking advantage of Lemurian technology and of its people. So that is what Siren's Song is. He is basically undercover as an opera singer. Now we're going to talk about Addictive Pain. Addictive Pain, Raphael moves back to Lincoln City, I think. Yeah, I think so. He moves back to Lincoln City and he starts lecturing at the university that the MC is attending. He can see the MC. He knows who the MC is. And he knows that if he interacts with her, he doesn't know what the future would hold, because he's like, oh, she's probably here as a trap by people who want to capture me since I'm Lemurian. So he doesn't interact with her. So he's just basically watching her from afar, even though he remembers the promise that he had with her. Alright, next up is a unique Vermilion. This is a life where Raphael now decides to become an artist. So after being an opera singer and then a lecturer at a university, he then wants to pursue art. This is where we almost meet him. Like, this is where he's establishing his career as a painter and as a sculptor. And he also hires Thomas. There's nothing really special about this anecdote besides him kind of like solidifying who he is. And then we have the main story. So this is where basically where we meet the MC, where we're introduced to her, and then moving forward from that. In that small little time frame from Unique Vermilion to the main story, we just take note there that Raphael created many paintings that were put into an auction that Raymond took part in, bought one of Raphael's paintings, and that is the same painting that basically drove him mad and killed him. So in an indirect way, Raphael did kill Raymond. Is there anything in that time frame else? I don't think there's anything else really notable about the timeline itself. Yeah, I don't think so. And also in the main story, we have then the limited myth for Xavier, where the MC finds out that Xavier is actually Lumiere. I mean, surprise, surprise, remove the mask. It's like Batman. And then that is pretty much it for the present. Now let's cover the past. Okay, so the first story that we're going to be talking about here is the limited myth for Raphael. During this story, we know that in the very distant past, Lemuria was at its peak, its most powerful, and this is actually where the whole story for the prophecy came from in Raphael's standard myth. the Deep Sea Promise. So this is where it all started. So Raphael is then created into the sea god, and the MC is then vowed to be his most devoted follower. And all of the removal of the heart and taking of the heart, the betrayal that he experiences here. So this is the beginning of basically Raphael's story, and this is like way in the past, because in the present right now we know of the ruins of Lemuria. So this of course had to happen before that, where Lemuria is at its peak. Now I haven't experienced this story for myself because I'm waiting for it to be rerun. However, if we do find out that there is no reruns for any of the myth banners, then I will then cave and watch it on YouTube. That being said, the next story that we're going to be talking about is Fragrant Dream. Fragrant Dream is speculated to be potentially part of the timeline or not part of the timeline. So that is just because it's technically a dream, and we don't know if this was actually true. However, what happens in this dream is that the MC turns into a sea witch because the Lemurian people are unhappy or something like that. So she turns into a sea witch and she loses all of her humanity, and in order to get her back, Raphael basically sacrifices himself, gives up 3 things, not specific on what those are right now, but if you go back into the source material, you'll find out what it is. However, he basically gives up his life and basically brings back the MC. Yep. And also gives her his heart. That is the story in Fragrant Dream. That is also a very big thing that I had to mention. But again, we don't know if this is true or not, or if it was just a dream. Okay, continuing on. Now, I put a lot of space here because I don't know what else happens in this time frame. However, my speculation is that the next thing that comes up in the story is actually Zane's limited myth banner. Now, I say it's this because the source material doesn't cover this, since it was created before Zane's limited myth banner came out, before any of the limited myth banners came out actually. But I think that this places in the past because the people, like the common folk, are not aware that people can have evils, people can have powers. I say this because in the first chapter of this story, the MC is basically cast out for being a little bit weird, for being able to will things into her way and use powers. And when she goes to this mountain in the forest, okay, potentially Mount Eternal, we don't know, she meets Zane, who then teaches her how to control her powers. And Zane is very interesting here because he seems to have a respectable position. He could already be in the lineage of royalty or something, because there's a point in this story, I think it's chapter 5 or 6, when the MC is kind of out buying a bracelet or whatever, and he talks to this old man, and the old man references that the girl, the MC, is a variable in the plan. So what is the plan? What is going on? And Zane says, you don't need to worry about her, you don't need to go near her, I will take care of it. And him taking care of it is not getting rid of the MC, but rather disappearing from the MC's life. That is the end of this story. It was actually very sad. But that is the story of this myth, and it's very interesting. We don't really have any more details or strings to connect things to when it comes to him, Zane and Astra, or the old man in this story and the old man in Raphael's story. It's very, very strange. There are some parallels to Amond, or whatever his name is, and this old man that is talking, but I don't think that they're the same person. That is my theory when it comes to the past and what Zane is doing in the past here. And then we have the unaccounted for timeline. Now, the unaccounted for timeline here is just like this massive space between the distant past and where Xavier lands. Now, Xavier landed in the present, technically, timeline here. However, we don't know where his initial destination was supposed to be. He doesn't specify where exactly he was supposed to land because there was something that went wrong in the deep space tunnel. For all we know, it could have been before Zane's story, or it could have been in Lemuria itself. We don't know where Xavier was actually planning to go to, and this whole portion here is then unaccounted for. However, the main question now that we're going to answer, or at least try to, is where does Silas fit into the story? Now, we know that Silas, is kind of a very complicated character. However, there has been a lot of speculation that he is very similar to Xavier, that he is also a time traveler. Not only is he from a time when he could be incarcerated in a prison as advanced as this, but he is also stated in the his anecdote that he was able to go to the N109 zone, have a brooch that was dated to be like hundreds of years old, and also have that conversation with the MC in his very first introduction, kind of implying that he knows more about the MC than the MC knows about herself, which is kind of indicative of either having multiple lives, multiple times that he met the MC, because the MC seems to have forgotten who Silas is. Now, that being said, I think then we can place where does Silas fit into the story. First and foremost, we know that Silas's anecdote will place somewhere in the future. I don't know where exactly in the future he places. Again, timelines, very confusing. Time travel, very confusing. Doesn't give a specific year or anything like that in his anecdote. Just saying that he is a basically commissioned to get back valuable items from a planet, like a space planet, and bring them back to all the people that they belong to. The thing that he was interested in getting, though, was something that would show him the way to a protocore or to a person, and that person is the MC. So that brings me to him going from the future to the present. He is basically traveling to the present, to where the indicator is basically blinking, and it shows that it is in the N109 zone. And at least then we can place that Silas's introduction to the story is after the Chrono Rift catastrophe. The N109 zone wasn't created until the Chrono Rift catastrophe, when all the Metaflux was introduced and all of the Wanderers were introduced to the Earth. So we can place him in this little portion here. We don't know where exactly he lands, like what year or what age in relation to all of the other love interests that he landed in on Earth, but we just know that he traveled back into the past. Now, his standard myth, of course, takes place in the main story, so I'm placing him right next to Lumiere there. I don't know if it's before or after. Actually, it would make sense that it would be after, but again, no solid proof. It's just happening during that time. Alright, next question would be, where would Silas's myth take place? Now, what I'm hoping for is that his myth would take place in the distant past, because there's just so much space here that is unaccounted for, but we don't really know. There is no real proof or fact that he was in the past, because if he was in the past, then that means he was living a very, very long life until he reached the future. But then why didn't he show up during the present? You know what I mean? So very interesting. He could be from the distant past. I kind of hope so, just because there's, again, this huge space that's not accounted for in the story. However, my inclination is that he's probably taking place in the future. Now, he could also be in that period where the Earth has already broken, and there is that period of the Earth is dead, but Philos hasn't been created yet, because who introduced that protocore to pull all of the tectonic plates together? back together. There has to be some time frame there also where we could, you know, slot in Silas's myth pair. You know what I'm saying? And also in that little snippet that we see in the main story of him and MC, the world around them looks completely broken apart. And I'm thinking that that is after the earth has been destroyed, but before Philos is created. That is my main speculation. However, it could also be when Philos is finally destroyed at the very end of this timeline, since Xavier is here trying to prevent the complete death of the complete death of Philos. So Silas could either be here, or Silas could either be here, like right at the death of Earth and the beginning of Philos, like right there, right in that small little section right here. So that is my speculation about where his myth would take place. If you have any questions, any concerns, any theories of your own, please do share it down in the comments down below. This is a very fun topic to discuss. I know this video is kind of long. However, I felt like, you know, if you want a full explanation of the timeline, this is what you gotta sit through. Again, if you want more info, definitely check out those source materials in the description box below. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I am Lynn, the Gacha Goblin, and I will see you lovelies in the next video. Bye bye now!